Hello, my name's Vivian Blonde. I've been looking at Lucy's case since the day she was arrested, the very first day she was arrested. My background is I was a registered nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital, and I worked there for almost 40 years, 26 of those years as a trade union branch secretary, so heavily involved in the Countess business side as well, if you like. I was a partnership worker, which meant that I worked very closely with the executives and senior management. And with that, we agreed to disagree, and we had many, many disagreements. But they were there to represent the management. I was there to represent staff, and I did my best. So when I actually walked into the hospital one afternoon, I wasn't working, I was visiting. There was TV cameras there, and they asked the question, what's going on? Oh, no. I can't tell you. So I came home, looked at the news, and immediately I felt something is wrong here. My gut instinct, my trade union head was back on, and I went to look into it. And I've been with it ever since. And my partner in crime here, we met. She has the same belief that this cannot continue. So I'm going to talk to you about the culture of fear and protecting health professionals and patient safety. And patient safety is paramount to every single person that works within the healthcare system. Don't ever forget that, things happen, mistakes get made, but at the end of the day, the patients are the priority. So today, I'm going to speak on behalf of 19 nurses, of which I'm a co-founder. I'm going to speak to you about the crisis that extends far beyond the single case or individual conviction. The Lucy Letby case has created shockwaves throughout our healthcare system, but the tremors that we feel today reveal deeper fractures that have been building for many years. We are seeing the profession in fear, nurses, doctors, healthcare workers who have lost their voice, lost their confidence in speaking truth to power. They've lost their faith in the very systems designed to protect both patients and the practitioners. There is erosion of the duty of candour, and this is very, very important. Healthcare professionals have a duty of candour. But that duty of candour was introduced to ensure transparency, honesty and openness when things do go wrong, and in healthcare, they do go wrong sometimes. But it's meant to be our compass, guiding us towards better patient safety through honest reflection, learning, and yet this fundamental principle has been eroded by fear. Healthcare professionals are increasingly reluctant to report concerns, to speak up about unsafe practices, or to admit that they've made a mistake. And that could all lead to improvement. So why is this? Because they've witnessed colleagues becoming scapegoats. They have seen individuals blamed for systemic failures. They have watched as complex medical situations are reduced to simplistic narratives of guilt and innocence, with career-ending and life-destroying consequences. When healthcare professionals fear that their honesty will be weaponised against them, when they believe that speaking up could make them targets, the entire foundation of safe healthcare begins to crumble, and patients are the people that suffer most. When the very people we're meant to protect us are too frightened to voice their concerns, then this becomes a major issue for patient safety. So we've got to confront some uncomfortable truths. Our healthcare system has developed a toxic tendency to seek out individuals to blame rather than to address systemic failures. When something goes wrong, and in healthcare, things inevitably do go wrong, there is often a rush to find someone to hold accountable, someone to punish, someone to sacrifice on the altar of public accountability. This scapegoat culture is not only unjust, it is dangerous. It drives problems underground rather than bringing them into the light where they can be addressed. It creates environments where healthcare workers are more concerned with protecting themselves than with improving care. It transforms colleagues into potential threats rather than cooperative workers and the mission of healing. And the ideal working relationships are in teams supporting each other, but that gets broken down. Healthcare is inherently complex. It involves multiple systems, processes, and human interactions. So when adverse events occur, they are typically a result of multiple system failures, not individual malice or incompetence. And too often, we see individuals bearing the full weight of organisational and systemic shortcomings. So we need to change this culture. The NHS and healthcare systems worldwide, it's not just here in the UK, there are a number of, we believe, innocent nurses globally that are incarcerated for similar reasons that Lucy and others have been incarcerated. They just happened to be there at the time. So we must undergo a fundamental cultural transformation. We need to move from a culture of fear and blame to one of learning and improvement. And this transformation requires several key elements. Firstly, we must establish genuine no-blame culture around clinical incident reporting. Healthcare professionals must feel safe to report errors, near misses, and systemic problems without fear of personal retribution. My time representing members, I found clinical incident reporting was not supported by many managers because they felt that that was a reflection on them. And it sometimes was difficult to get the information I needed to support the member that I was representing, particularly on staffing levels. So secondly, we must recognise that mistakes are inevitably complex in healthcare environments, and our goal should be to eliminate all human error, but that's an impossible task. So we need to create systems that are resilient to inevitable human fallibility. This means building in safeguards and checks that catch errors before they reach the patient. And thirdly, we must celebrate and protect those who speak up. Whistleblowers and concerned healthcare professionals should not be seen as threats. They should be supported, not silenced or marginalised. One thing here that concerns me a lot is the silence of the trade unions. We need to call them into action. One of the most troubling aspects of our current crisis is this deafening silence from the trade unions. Where are the voices that should be defending healthcare professionals? Where are the organisations that should be fighting for fair treatment and due processes and protection from scapegoating? As was said earlier, the unions have not replied when we contacted them. And I myself am horrified by that. So trade unions have a critical role to play in this. They must advocate for their members' right to work in environments that are free from fear of unfair persecution. They must demand proper investigation procedures that focus on system improvement rather than individual punishment. They must fight for due process in cases where healthcare professionals face allegations. The unions cannot remain neutral when their members are living in fear. They cannot stay silent when healthcare professionals are being criminalised for what may be systematic failures. So it is time now for the trade union leadership, and I'm calling on the trade unions to step forward and address these failures in the NHS and to advocate for the kind of healthcare culture that protects both staff and patients. So the broader pattern now, other cases of injustice. Lucy Letby, while prominent, is not an isolated incident. There are other healthcare professionals currently in prison maintaining their innocence, fighting for years to have their cases heard in appeal courts. These individuals represent a pattern that should concern all of us, a pattern of healthcare professionals being criminalised for complex medical situations that may have alternative explanations. Each of these cases represents not just an individual tragedy, but the symptom of a system that's lost its way. When we criminalise healthcare professionals without fully understanding the complex medical, systemic and environmental factors that may have contributed to these adverse outcomes, we are now risking getting a generation of healthcare workers who are frightened to take on challenging cases. They're too scared to make difficult decisions and too worried about their own survival to focus on patient care. So, as I've said, this goes across all of the healthcare professionals, not just nurses, but it is mainly nurses that have been falsely accused or used as scapegoats. But every single person working in healthcare is at risk. So the question of expertise in investigations and prosecution, the Lucy Letby case has really brought this out to the forefront. And this brings us to the fundamental question that must be addressed, is how qualified are police to investigate thoroughly complex medical cases? How can criminal prosecution and defence teams, judges and juries, without medical knowledge, properly judge matters that require deep understanding of medical science, healthcare systems and clinical practice? The current system asks police officers to investigate situations that even medical professionals find complex and ambiguous. It asks prosecutors with no medical training to decide whether healthcare professionals should face criminal charges. It asks juries with no medical background to make life-altering decisions about medical practice and patient care. This is not to suggest that healthcare professionals should be above the law. Rather, it is to argue that we need specialised systems and expertise when dealing with medical cases. We need investigation teams that include medical experts. We need prosecutors who understand healthcare. We need judicial process that can properly weigh the complexity of this medical evidence. So, the path forward. What is the solution? How do we move forward from this crisis of fear and mistrust? First, we must commit to being transparent, thorough with investigations and all adverse events in healthcare, conducted by teams with appropriate medical expertise. These investigations must focus on system improvement rather than individual blame. My example for that would be aircraft investigators. The team go in, they have access to everything, nobody is allowed to touch anything, and they work looking for a reason, not for someone to blame. And from that, recommendations come out which go worldwide in safe air travel. And yet we allow police officers with no medical experience whatsoever to come in and investigate our complexities. And that has to stop. So secondly, we need to establish clear protections for healthcare professionals who act in good faith. These include legal protections, institutional support, and union advocacy. Thirdly, we must invest in better systems, better training, better support for healthcare professionals. Many of the problems we face stem from understaffing, inadequate resources, and overwhelming workloads. And I think that has been quite paramount for those looking into, Lucy's case. But addressing these systematic issues is essential to prevent any further tragedies like this. And fourth, we must reform prosecution process of medical cases. They may require specialist courts They may have enhanced medical expertise in the justice system and new approaches to determining when criminal charges are appropriate versus when regulatory or administrative responses are more suitable. So, in conclusion, the healthcare profession stands at a crossroads. We can continue down the current path of fear and blame and scapegoated, watch as our best and brightest healthcare professionals leave the profession because they're too frightened to provide the kind of bold, innovative care that patients need. Or we can choose a different path, one that emphasises learning over punishment, system improvement over individual blame, and support over persecution. The choice is ours, but we must make it now. Every day we delay, more healthcare professionals lose confidence in their profession. Every day we wait, more patients potentially suffer from healthcare system paralysed by the fear. We owe it to the healthcare professionals who have dedicated their lives to caring for others. We owe it to the patients who depend on us for their health and well-being. And we owe it to ourselves to recreate a healthcare system worthy of the noble calling that brought every one of us into that profession. So, time for silence now is over, and we need to take action now. We need to work together to build a better healthcare culture and to protect both those who give care and those who receive it. Because in the end, their safety and well-being are intrinsically linked.